Shabbat Shalom. With Thanksgiving just days away, if there is a single shared iconic image of the holiday that comes to mind, it's Norman Rockwell's famous painting, Freedom from Want. This isn't the original. Created in November of 1942 and published on the cover of the March 6, 1943 issue of the Saturday Evening Post, the painting depicts a large intergenerational family gathered around the holiday table, the central focal point being the roasted turkey served by the family matriarch. The tablecloths are white, the silver is polished, and the food, celery, cranberry sauce, and casserole, abundant. As for the people seated at the table, they are as white as the tablecloths. Their gazes directed at each other, so sated and overjoyed by each other's smiling selves that they pay no attention to the turkey. Or as one art historian suggests, it's a nod to the participants of Da Vinci's Last Supper, in which none of the celebrants are looking at the sacrificial offering at the center. As you may know, the original painting, now housed in the Norman Rockwell Museum in Massachusetts, was inspired by President Franklin Roosevelt's famed 1941 Four Freedoms State of the Union address: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. The four values for which brave soldiers were sent to the front and make the ultimate sacrifice. 4 paintings were commissioned, one for each freedom. The Thanksgiving scene representing Rockwell's idealized vision of abundance, cleanliness, and purity, not a single glass of wine on the table, as the title implies, a world in which there is no want. And while you may be familiar with the painting and Roosevelt's speech that gave life to it, what you may not know is a controversy that surrounded it at the time. Because while Rockwell's intent was to champion a hopeful vision of America, in the mind of his critics, his painting was out of touch, in that the world it represented was not only unrealistic, but tone deaf to the struggles faced by most Americans and most of humanity. As so many faced economic adversity, racial oppression, and the hardships of war, this homogeneous, affluent, and blissful image of family life was seen as exclusionary. For Europe, in the throes of a European war, all the more so it left a bitter taste, which Rockwell himself subsequently noted the resentment that it prompted. Complicating matters further was the fact that Rockwell's painting, as was the case with each of the other 3 paintings, was printed with a companion thought piece. The Freedom from Want essay was written by the Filipino immigrant novelist and labor organizer Carlos Bulosan, who used the opportunity to give voice to the struggles he and his fellow immigrants endured. An essay disquieting in both substance and style, to quote but one selection, an America, quote, where the tear gas is choking unprotected children, where the prisoner is beaten to confess a crime he did not commit, where the honest man is hanged because he told the truth. We are the mirror of what America is, Bulosan raged. If America wants us to be living and free, then we must all be living and free. If we fail, then America fails. Jarring as Bulosan's essay, the juxtaposition between his contribution and Rockwell's painting is even more startling. In fact, when Rockwell read an early draft of Bulosan's essay, he contemplated destroying his painting. The gap between his vision and Bulosan's reality a bridge too far. Only the desperate intervention of the Post's editor saved the painting and the day. Looking back, both men were given the same freedom from want assignment, but responded in 2 very different ways. Bulosan speaking to the harsh American realities of his existence, and Rockwell hoping to inspire with an aspirational vision. Two very different narratives of our country, a split screen, a fault line that was revealed, competing visions of the American story. That was them, that was then, this is today. What is your version of the American story? What image comes to mind as you imagine where we are and where we should be heading as a nation? What is your harsh essay of critique? What is your idealized Rockwellian vision? It's a question that we should consider at all times, that we should in this season of Thanksgiving, and yes, urgently so, as we seek to make sense of a divisive election result. An evenly split popular vote revealing an electorate divided not only between red states and blue states, but a fissure at our very foundation, the story of who we are as Americans and who we seek to be. Communities, national, religious, or otherwise, are far more than a matter of borders and passports, ethnicity, or language. Communities, and nobody knows this better than the Jews, are constructed by way of narrative, self-constructed social realities, the stories we tell informing and forming the reality we inhabit and the future we seek to inhabit. Narratives that ground us, inspire us, and sometimes, oftentimes, divide us. Narratives conflicting with the competing narratives of others who lay claim to the same community or nation. Narratives unite, narratives divide, and narratives evolve. Like many in this room, I imagine, I recall childhood Thanksgiving assemblies. Some years I was dressed up as a pilgrim, some years as a Native American. Well-intended as such efforts were, highlighting the values of courage, gratitude, and patriotism, today they strike me as out of touch with our era of identity politics, indigenous claims, and cultural appropriation. I remember as a graduate student studying some of the competing American narratives, Winthrop's Puritan vision of a city on a hill, the first colonists errand into the wilderness, the Founding Fathers' vision of God's new Israel, an America characterized by self-made, self-reliant, frontier-conquering, rugged individualism, or alternatively, a nation of uprooted immigrants. In the words of Oscar Hanlon, once I thought to write a history of the immigrants in America, then I discovered the immigrants were American history. Sometimes the narratives come by way of popular culture. Israel Zangwill's 1908 Melting Pot play, a title suggestive of an America in which all our differences melt into one. An image countered by Callan's orchestral vision, whereby the instrument of every person and people sounds its unique timbre and tonality, each contributing to a symphony of American life. Sometimes the differences can be traced by way of the American musical canon. As those of you raised on Springsteen's live box set know well, as do I, Woody Guthrie's "This Land Is Your Land" was an angry song, written and as an answer to Irving Berlin, who had just written God Bless America, which Guthrie believed suffered from blind patriotism, exclusivity, and as with Rockwell, cut off from the hardships faced by Americans then in the 10th year of the Great Depression. And while the exercise of identifying and tracing competing American narratives is an endlessly fascinating exercise, at least to me, practically speaking, the question that matters most is to name the competing narratives that presently divide our nation. Because no matter who you voted for in this last election, the nature of a democracy is that it's not just a candidate who wins and loses, but a narrative. Kennedy had his New Frontier. Reagan had his Morning in America. Obama had his Yes, We Can. And President-elect Trump has his Make America Great Again. Of course, there are policies and character and competency at stake in elections, but the inescapable fact is that more folk voted to make America great again than whatever the other side was offering. Even the vice president's supporters, as I heard former President Clinton reflect the other night at the Beacon Theater, grudgingly conceded that whatever the merits of the respective candidates' positions on economic, social, or foreign policy may be, President Trump was able to tap into American voter discontent in a way that ultimately led him to victory. No matter what Clinton believes, you believe, or I believe is best for this country, the results of this election were clear in that they were more people who found common cause with President Trump's vision than the alternative. All of which, I believe, brings us back to our Thanksgiving tables, because in just a few days, we will welcome family and friends around our tables for turkey and some of you tofurkey, our annualized and ritualized opportunity to share our inherited, evolving, and divided national story. For many, I know this will not be an easy exercise. This week, I've heard from more than one congregational family of folks unwilling to sit down together due to the fractious political lines of our time. I am deeply worried that if we lose the ability to break bread in our own biological families, how can we ever do so as a national family? A troubling state of affairs that should worry us all. And while I have no national remedy, I take comfort in the knowledge that as Jews, we know a little bit about the power of sharing our stories around our Passover table, of course, or as we know from this week's Torah reading, as they are passed down from one generation to the next. Nobody does it better than the Jews. And this year, I encourage you and your families to use your Jewish story muscle group around the Thanksgiving table to reacquaint yourself, reaffirm, and restore the possibility and promise of a shared American national narrative. So in that spirit, I offer you 4 questions to guide your efforts, which I'll send out to the community in an email after Shabbat. Number 1, go around the table and ask every person to share their version of the American story. In Passover speak, what, if anything, makes our nation different from all other nations? What is it that binds our nation together? What is our shared history, values, frustrations, and aspirations? Share your story and give others the chance to share theirs. Number 2, go around the table and ask which American stories are not at your table. It goes without saying there's still time to invite people to your table, all the more so folk with views different than your own. Those voices need to be heard. Read an article if you can't get them there physically, or read Beloson's essay that represent a different reality. Discuss it. Be curious. Be empathetic. Make room in your heart for the possibility that your narrative isn't the only one. Number 3, and building on number 1 and 2, ask yourself and ask each other how to build common ground between the competing versions of our great national story. In a nation that's divided between those seeking to make America great again and those saying that they are not going back, is there a place where we can all come together? The divides are pronounced and will not be easily bridged, but we need a place to start. Invested as we all are in the well-being of our country, we need to build dialogue, trust, and common cause. Number 4, finally and most importantly, what are you grateful for? This is, after all, Thanksgiving. And no matter our flaws and internal divides, America remains the greatest country in the world and altogether worthy of our care and concern. What are you grateful for, and how are you going to leverage your attitude of gratitude towards the betterment of our country? How can you get involved in politics, philanthropy, advocacy, or volunteerism? Tomorrow is our annual mitzvah day here at the synagogue. Come, bring your children and grandchildren, deliver food to the homeless, help homebound elderly, donate winter clothes to the needy. As Jews, we know the most authentic expression of gratitude are acts of tzedakah. Mitzvah day is not meant to be a one-off, it's a kickoff Do it tomorrow, do it every day. We're all stakeholders in the well-being of our country and community. 4 questions, but really a single call for dialogue and action from our founding fathers to Norman Rockwell to today. The story of our nation has been written and rewritten, debated and disputed, more narratives and counter-narratives than dare be counted, a tangled web that animates and divides our collective sense of self. But the most important thing to say about our national narrative is not what it says or doesn't say, but to note that it's still being written by you, by me, by all of us, and the stories we tell, the stories of others to which we give heed, and the healing deeds which we perform. In private at our Thanksgiving tables, in public wherever we go, we remember that though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. Caring for our country, caring for each other, in dialogue, and building a shared vision and future together. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining the Park Avenue Synagogue family. I hope you enjoyed the sermon. Please consider supporting our online community by scanning the QR code or by going to supportpas.org or by making a donation. Shalom and see you in Shul.